The most dangerous thing in that room full of killers wasn't the guns. Wasn't the money. Wasn't even the man they called the Siberian Wolf, a crime lord so feared that grown men crossed the street when they saw him coming. It was a 5-year-old girl in a yellow dress. She walked straight through his armed guards like they were ghosts. Walked past tables where men were discussing murders over whiskey. Walked directly up to Nikolai Volkov, the same man who'd once made 3 people disappear for looking at him wrong, and did something no one had dared to do in 16 years. She touched him. Her tiny hand gripped his sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. "Please hide me. The manager hurts Mama." The entire bar went silent. Because everyone knew Nikolai's rule. Never get involved. Never care. Never risk the empire for sentiment. But when this child climbed into his booth without permission, pressing herself against his side like he was salvation instead of damnation, something cracked in the wolf's chest. And when they opened her backpack, when they saw what this little girl had been carrying, what her mother had drawn in desperate crayon strokes, documenting every moment of hell, Nikolai Volkov made a choice that would either save 2 innocent lives or destroy everything he'd built. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Across the restaurant, behind the swinging Kit Martha doors and past the storage room that smelled of onions and cardboard, Martha Williams moved between tables with the efficient grace of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. She was pretty in a way men noticed, but she'd trained herself to deflect. Hair always in a tight bun, uniform pressed but unremarkable, eyes down, smile professional but distant. She'd been beautiful once, in the photos she kept hidden in her locker. Before the debt. Before immigration lawyers who disappeared with her money. Before her husband died in a construction accident, leaving her alone in a country where she barely spoke the language. Before the manager, Frank Russo, discovered she was desperate. "Table 6 needs refills," Russo barked from the doorway, his eyes lingering on her in a way that made her skin crawl. "And Martha?" "My office. After your shift." Her hands tightened around the tray she carried. "Sarai. My office." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We need to discuss your payment plan." She felt her daughter's face flash in her mind. Lily, hidden in the storage room like she was every night Martha Williams worked the evening shift. 5 years old and already learning that the world was not safe, that men with power took what they wanted, that sometimes Mama came home with bruises she tried to hide. In the storage room, Lily sat cross-legged between boxes of napkins and industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce, her small yellow dress, the nice one, the birthday one from before everything got hard, spotless despite the dusty floor. She'd learned to keep herself clean, keep herself quiet, keep herself hidden. Her backpack, worn and patched with duct tape, sat in her lap like a security blanket. Inside were her important things. Mama's ID badge in case something happened, crackers wrapped in napkin in case she got hungry, her one-eyed teddy bear named Hope, and the journal with the drawings Mama made her promise to keep safe. "If anything happens to me," Mama had said, her voice shaking, "you show these to someone safe. Someone strong. You understand, Bao Bao." But who was safe? Who was strong enough? Lily had been drawing with her 3 crayons, red, blue, yellow, the only ones not broken, when she heard the voices. Loud voices. Mama's voice, high and frightened, and the manager's voice, mean and scary. "You owe me, Martha. You think working here is payment enough? You think I don't know you've been pocketing tips? Hiding cash?" "I haven't. Please, Mr. Russo, I swear." "Shut up. You're coming with me. Nah. And maybe, if you're very cooperative, I'll forget about this. Otherwise, maybe Immigration Services gets a call about an undocumented worker with a Please. I have a daughter. She's. The sound of a hand hitting flesh. Lily's crayon snapped. She peered through the crack in the storage room door and saw the manager dragging her mother toward the back exit, toward the basement stairwell, toward the place Mama told her never to go, where bad things happened to people who couldn't pay. Lily's heart hammered. Her hands shook. But Mama had said, if anything happens, find someone strong. She pushed open the door. The main dining room glittered with chandeliers and danger. Lily's eyes scanned the crowd desperately, her 5-year-old instincts trying to separate the people who hurt from the people who protected. Most of the men looked scary. All of them looked big. Then her eyes landed on the corner booth. The man sitting there was terrifying. Tattoos and scars and eyes that looked like winter. But everyone was afraid of him. She'd watched from her hiding spot other nights, seen how people moved around him carefully, how waitresses served him quickly, how even the manager wouldn't walk past his table without permission. If everyone was afraid of him, maybe he was the strongest. Lily clutched her backpack to her chest and took one trembling step forward. Then another. Then she was walking across the floor of the Crimson Rose, her white shoes clicking on the marble, her yellow dress bright as a warning flare in the dim room, heading straight toward the most dangerous man in the city. What would you do if you were 5 years old and needed to choose who to trust in a room full of strangers? Have you ever had to make an impossible decision about who to ask for help? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about those moments when we had to be braver than we felt. Nikolai was reviewing the weekly numbers on Dimitri's tablet when the room's energy shifted. It was subtle, the kind of thing you learn to notice when staying alive depended on reading a room. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they faltered. Someone gasped softly. The jazz pianist missed a note. He looked up. A child was walking toward his table. Not just any child. A little girl in a yellow dress that had seen better days, blonde hair falling around her shoulders, clutching a backpack almost as big as she was. Her eyes were locked on him with the kind of desperate focus he'd seen in the eyes of men about to beg for their lives. But this wasn't a man. This was a baby. His men moved instinctively to intercept. Dimitri stood, hand moving toward his jacket. "Hey, sweetheart, you can't." But something in her face stopped them all cold. Terror. Determination. And something else, a kind of bone-deep desperation that transcended language, age, culture. It was the look of someone who'd run out of options and was making a final bet on a long shot. She walked right past Dimitri's outstretched hand. Walked past the 2 enforcers flanking the booth. Walked straight up to Nikolai Volkov and stopped, her head barely reaching the edge of his table. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Nikolai's mind was racing, calculating threats, analyzing angles. Who sent her? What's the play? Is she wired? Is this some kind of... Please. The word came out as barely more than a whisper, her small voice cracking with effort. Her hands were shaking so badly the backpack trembled against her chest. Please hide me. The entire bar went silent. The jazz piano stopped. The clink of glasses ceased. Every eye in the Crimson Rose turned toward the corner booth where a 5-year-old girl was begging a mob boss for protection. Nikolai's throat went tight. For one horrible, disorienting second, he wasn't looking at this child. He was looking at Katerina, his daughter, the night before she died, asking him, "Papa, why do the bad men want to hurt us?" "The manager," the little girl continued, her words tumbling out faster now, desperate to be heard before she was taken away. "He hurts Mama. He takes her to the basement and she comes back crying and she has bruises and she tries to hide them, but I see and I'm scared, and Mama said if anything happens find someone strong, and you're strong. Everyone's afraid of you. So please, please, please." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her round cheeks, but she didn't look away from his face. She didn't back down. "Please hide me." Nikolai opened his mouth, But no words came. His hand, which had been resting calmly on the table, began to tremble. And then, without asking permission, without waiting for an answer, the little girl climbed onto the booth seat beside him, wedging herself between his body and the leather back, making herself as small as possible. She pressed against his side, her tiny frame shaking like a leaf. "Thank you," she whispered into his jacket. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The storage room door banged open, and Frank Russo stormed out, his face flushed red with rage and something darker. His tie was loose, his knuckles raw. "Where is she?" he snarled, scanning the room. "Where's the little brat? Her mother owes me, and she's going to watch what happens when people don't." His eyes landed on the corner booth. On Nikolai Volkov, sitting perfectly still, his face expressionless. On the small yellow dress visible beside him. The color drained from Russo's face like water from a broken glass. "Mr. Volkov," he stammered, trying to recover, forcing a laugh that came out strangled. "Sorry, I didn't realize. There's been a misunderstanding. That child, she belongs to one of our waitresses, and there's been an incident. If you could just—" Nikolai's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. "The child is with me now." 5 words. Spoken quietly, almost gently. But they landed with a death sentence. Russo's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The room held its breath. Even the other patrons, the ones who weren't part of Nikolai's world, could feel the shift in power, the way the temperature dropped 10 degrees. "You have 3 seconds to walk away from my table," Nikolai continued, his pale eyes fixed on Russo with the intensity of a predator selecting prey. 1. Russo took a step back. 2. The manager's hands came up in surrender, his voice cracking. "Of course, Mr. Volkov. My apologies. I didn't mean to. We can discuss this another time." "There will be no other time," Nikolai said softly. "If I see you near this child again, if I hear you've gone near her mother again, if I even hear you've thought about them again, you won't need to worry about basements anymore. Do we understand each other?" Russo nodded frantically and practically ran toward his office. His earlier bravado shattered completely. The room slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. The pianist started playing again, though his hands were less steady than before. Beside Nikolai, the little girl still pressed against his side, her tiny fists gripping a handful of his expensive jacket. She was still shaking, but the desperate terror had faded slightly, replaced by something fragile and new. Relief. She tilted her head up to look at him, and Nikolai forced himself to meet her eyes. They were brown and wide and full of something he didn't deserve. "Trust." "Thank you," she whispered again. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she added in a voice so small he almost didn't hear it, "Can you help Mama too?" The manager took her to the basement. "She's scared." "She's always scared." Nikolai felt something crack inside his chest. Something he'd sealed shut 15 years ago with concrete and rage and the promise to never, ever feel this vulnerable again. He looked down at this impossible child, this brave, terrified little girl who'd chosen him. Him, a man with blood on his hands and darkness in his soul, as her last hope. His hand moved before his brain could stop it, resting awkwardly on her small shoulder. The gesture was stiff, unpracticed, but it was there. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. She sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Lily." "Lily Martha. I'm 5 3/4. "Lily," he repeated, and the name felt strange in his mouth. Too innocent, too pure for the world he inhabited. "I'm Nikolai." "I know," she said simply. "Everyone knows your name. They say you're the scariest man in the city." He almost smiled. "Almost. And yet you walked up to me anyway." She nodded seriously. Mama says the scariest people are sometimes the ones who can protect you best. Because nobody messes with them. Smart mother. Desperate mother. Where is your mama now? He asked. Lily's face crumpled, fresh tears welling. The basement. The manager dragged her. She was crying. She said, no, but he didn't listen. He never listens. Her small voice dropped to a whisper. He hurts her. He says she owes him money, but Mama works so hard. She works every day, and I don't understand why it's never enough. Dimitri appeared at the edge of the booth, his expression carefully neutral. Boss. Nikolai looked at his second-in-command, then down at the child pressed against his side. Every logical part of his brain was screaming that this was a trap, a complication, a liability he couldn't afford. But all he could see was Katerina's face. All he could hear was his daughter's voice asking, Papa, why won't you help? Find the mother, Nikolai said quietly. Martha Williams. Waitress. Check the basement first. Bring her to me. Unharmed. Dimitri nodded once and disappeared. Lily looked up at him with something like wonder, like he'd just promised her the moon. You're going to save Mama? Nikolai couldn't promise that. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. But he also couldn't look into those eyes and say no. I'm going to try, he said finally. And for the first time in 15 years, Nikolai Volkov meant it. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone showed unexpected kindness to a stranger? Sometimes protection comes from the most unlikely people. What's the bravest thing you've ever seen a child do? Share your stories below. Let's honor those moments of courage. Nikolai told himself this was temporary. A business decision. Strategic positioning. The manager had disrespected him in his own establishment. That couldn't stand. The child was simply a convenient excuse to assert dominance, to remind everyone in the Crimson Rose who truly held power here. That's what he told himself. But the way Lily's tiny hand still gripped his jacket sleeve told a different story. Dimitri will find your mother, he said, his voice more gruff than he intended. He tried to shift away slightly, to create distance, but Lily pressed closer, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. You promise? She asked, her brown eyes searching his face. I don't make promises. Oh. Her face fell slightly, but she didn't release his jacket. Mama says only make promises you can keep. She says lying is worse than saying nothing. Smart child. Too smart for 5 years old. Nikolai pulled out his phone, intending to make calls, to handle business, to return to the comfortable distance of logistics and strategy. But every time he started to dial, Lily would shift nervously, and he'd find himself pausing, unable to ignore the trembling small body pressed against his side. Are you hungry? The question surprised him as much as it did her. Lily shook her head quickly. Too quickly. When did you last eat? She looked down at her scuffed white shoes, swinging them slightly above the floor. Yesterday. Breakfast. Mama made me rice porridge. Yesterday. Nikolai's jaw tightened. What about lunch? Dinner. Mama said. Lily's voice became very small. Mama said to save the bread for tonight. But then the manager came and he was yelling about money and tips, and Mama's hands were shaking when she gave me my crackers and told me to hide, and I heard. She stopped abruptly, biting her lip. Nikolai noticed bruises then, faint yellow-green marks on her small arms, the kind that came from rough gripping. His vision went red at the edges. Dimitri, he said into his phone, his voice deadly calm. When you find the mother, I also want security footage from the past month. Everything. Storage room, Kit Martha, basement. And get the child some food. Now. Within minutes, a plate appeared. Nothing from the regular menu. Dmitri had gone to the kit Martha and personally made a simple meal. Steamed rice, grilled chicken cut into small pieces, fresh fruit. Safe food. Child food. Lily stared at it like it might disappear. Eat, Nikolai said. She didn't move. Lily. Eat. Mama says don't take things from strangers. I'm not a stranger anymore. You know my name. She considered this logic with heartbreaking seriousness, then picked up the fork with careful, precise movements. She ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned not to waste a single bite. Every few seconds, she glanced up at him, as if confirming he was still there. Halfway through the meal, she stopped and carefully wrapped the remaining food in the napkin. For Mama. When she comes. Something twisted in Nikolai's chest. His phone buzzed. Dimitri's message made his blood boil. Found her. Basement storage. Manager had her locked in. She's alive but injured. Bringing her up now. Boss, it's bad. Nikolai's hand clenched around the phone so tightly the screen cracked. Lily noticed, her eyes widening. Is Mama okay? He forced his expression to neutral. She's coming. Before Lily could respond, his business line rang. One of his lieutenants from the South District, calling about the shipment situation. Normally Nikolai would take this call immediately. It was urgent, it was important, it was the kind of thing that kept his empire running. But when he answered and started speaking in rapid Russian, Lily flinched at his harsh tone, pressing herself smaller into the booth. He found himself softening his voice mid-sentence, switching to English, shortening the call. Handle it. I'll call back in an hour. Boss, this really needs your... I said I'll call back. He hung up. Lily was watching him with those two old eyes. Are you a bad man? The question landed like a punch. Yes, he answered honestly. Because he'd never lied to children, not even his own daughter. I've done bad things. But you're helping us. That doesn't make me good. She thought about this, her small forehead wrinkling in concentration. Mama says people aren't all good or all bad. She says everyone has light and dark, and what matters is which one you choose. Your Mama sounds wise. She is. She's the best Mama. Lily's voice cracked. I'm scared the manager hurt her really bad. Nikolai didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to comfort. His own daughter, he'd comforted with presents, with hugs, with promises that everything would be okay. Promises he'd ultimately failed to keep. So instead, he did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He put his arm around the small child beside him, awkward and unpracticed, and let her lean against him. Your mother is coming, he said quietly. And the manager will never touch either of you again. That's not a promise. That's a fact. Lily's hand found his, her tiny fingers wrapping around two of his scarred knuckles. Thank you, Mr. Nikolai. Just then, the elevator doors opened. Dmitri emerged, supporting a small Asian woman who could barely walk. Her uniform was torn, blood trickling from her split lip, dark bruises already forming on her neck and arms. Her hair had come loose from its bun, hanging in tangled strands around her battered face. But the moment she saw Lily, her expression transformed, terror becoming desperate relief. Lily! Mama! Lily scrambled out of the booth, nearly falling in her haste, running across the floor. Martha Williams dropped to her knees despite the obvious pain, catching her daughter, clutching her so tightly it must have hurt. Both of them were sobbing, incomprehensible words in Mandarin and English mixing together. Bow, 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 I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Mama, you're bleeding, Mama. I'm okay, are you safe? Did he touch you? Did anyone? I'm okay. The scary man saved me. He saved us. Martha Williams looked up then, her tearful eyes meeting Nikolai's across the room. She was still kneeling, still holding her daughter, but she bowed her head deeply. "Thank you," she said, her accented English thick with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I don't know why you helped, but thank you. We'll leave. Tonight. Right now. We'll go and we won't bring you any trouble, I promise. We'll just—" "You're not going anywhere tonight," Nikolai interrupted. "You can barely stand. But the manager, he has friends, he has connections, he'll—" "The manager is no longer your concern." Martha Williams's eyes widened, understanding the implication. "Sir, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm deciding." Dmitri appeared at Nikolai's side, his phone in hand, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a problem." Of course they did. "The manager filed a police report 20 minutes ago. Says you kidnapped his employee's child. Says he has witnesses." Nikolai's jaw clenched. "His connections? Some of them are legitimate. Detective Morrison, the one we don't own. He's already asking questions. And—" Dmitri hesitated. "And the Sicario crew just sent a message. They're saying the manager is under their protection. That you overstepped. They're calling it a territorial violation." The Sicarios. The very crew Nikolai had been carefully avoiding conflict with for 3 years. The crew that controlled the restaurant district, that had connections to city officials he didn't, that could make his life significantly more complicated. "They're demanding you turn over the woman and child as restitution for the disrespect." Nikolai's blood turned to ice. From across the room, Lily was watching him, still holding her mother, her expression shifting from relief to new fear. She'd heard. Children always heard more than adults realized. "What are you going to do, boss?" Dmitri asked quietly. Every strategic bone in Nikolai's body was screaming the smart play. "Walk away. Give them back. Avoid the bloodshed." He'd built 15 years of careful empire on knowing when to fight and when to fold. This was clearly a fold situation. He looked at Lily. At her bruised arms. At her too thin frame. On the way she'd wrapped the food for her mother. At the backpack she was still clutched like a lifeline. By the way she'd chosen him, impossibly, as her protector. "Tell the Sicarios I need to think about it," he said finally. "Buy me 6 hours." Dmitri nodded and walked away. Martha Williams was struggling to her feet, pulling Lily with her. "We'll go. Right now. Before this gets worse. I'm so grateful, Mr. Volkov, but I won't let you start a war for—" "Sit down," Nikolai said not unkindly. "You're injured. Rest." "But—" Lily pulled away from her mother and walked back to Nikolai. Stood in front of him. And with the devastating honesty only children possess, she said. "You promised you'd try. You said you'd try to save Mama." "I didn't promise. You said you'd try." Her voice rose, tears streaming. "You said. And now you're going to give us back to the bad men just like everyone else. You're just like all the other grown-ups who say they'll help but they don't. They never do, they just—" She was hitting his legs now with her small fists, not hard enough to hurt but hard enough to break something inside him. "You're a liar. You're a liar just like everyone else." Martha Williams rushed forward, pulling her daughter back, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, sir, she doesn't understand, she's just a child. Please forgive." But Nikolai wasn't listening to Martha Williams. He was staring at Lily's tear-stained face, at her betrayed eyes, at the way she believed in him and he'd already failed her. Just like he'd failed Katerina. "Get them out of here," he said hoarsely to Dmitri. "Take them to the safe house. Now." As Dmitri led them away, Lily looked back over her shoulder one last time, her small voice carrying across the room. "I thought you were strong. But you're just scared like everyone else." The words hit harder than any bullet. When they were gone, Nikolai sat alone in his booth, the empty chair beside him mocking him, the locket heavy against his chest. His phone rang again. "Business. Always business." He answered, but for the first time in 15 years, his mind wasn't on the empire he'd built. It was on a 5-year-old girl who'd had the courage to ask for help. And on the man he'd become who was too afraid to give it. Have you ever had to choose between doing what's safe and doing what's right? Sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that cost us the most. Drop a comment about a time you had to be braver than you felt. Let's share those moments that changed us. The safe house was anything but. It was Nikolai's private office suite above the Crimson Rose. 3 rooms of dark leather furniture, steel fixtures, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's glittering skyline, and absolutely nothing that belonged in a space occupied by a traumatized woman and a 5-year-old child. Dmitri had brought them up through the private elevator, settled them in the main room, and left without a word. Now Martha Williams sat stiffly on the edge of the massive leather couch, one arm wrapped protectively around Lily, the other pressed against her bruised ribs. And Nikolai stood by the window, his back to them, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian that sounded like controlled fury. Lily watched him, her earlier anger deflating into confused fear. She'd called him a liar. She'd hit him. And now they were in his private space, trapped, and she didn't know if that made them safe or in more danger. "Mama," she whispered in Mandarin, "are we prisoners?" Martha Williams stroked her daughter's hair with a trembling hand. "I don't know, Bao Bao. I don't know." Nikolai ended his call and turned. His pale eyes swept over them, the injured woman trying to hold herself together, the small girl who'd somehow managed to dismantle 15 years of emotional fortification in under an hour. "You can't go home," he said bluntly. "The manager knows where you live. So do the sicarios by now. If you leave this building, I can't protect you." Martha Williams's voice was barely above a whisper. "So we're staying here? Until I figure out how to handle this." "Yes. How long?" "I don't know." The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. Martha Williams nodded slowly, then winced as the movement jarred her injuries. "You need medical attention," Nikolai observed. "I'm fine. You have broken ribs. Possibly a concussion. You're not fine. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay." He pulled out his phone again. "I have a doctor on call. Discreet. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Before Martha Williams could protest, he was already making the call, switching back to Russian, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, I'm thirsty." Martha Williams tried to stand, gasped in pain, and sat back down heavily. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes, not from the pain, but from the inability to care for her daughter. Nikolai hung up and disappeared into the adjoining room. When he returned, he carried a bottle of water and a juice box he must have kept. For what? He never had children here. Never had anyone here except business associates who drank vodka and whiskey. But somewhere in this austere space, there had been a juice box. He handed it to Lily, who took it hesitantly, her eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded stiffly and retreated to his desk, putting distance between himself and them, as if proximity itself was dangerous. For several minutes, the only sounds were the city traffic far below and the quiet sucking noise of Lily drinking through the small straw. Martha Williams watched Nikolai with the wariness of prey watching a predator, grateful but terrified, unable to relax despite the temporary safety. Lily finished her juice and set the empty box carefully on the coffee table. Then she slid off the couch, clutching her backpack, and padded across the room. "What are you doing?" Martha Williams called out weakly. I want to see, Lily said simply. She approached Nikolai's desk like she was approaching a sleeping bear, slowly ready to run, but driven by irrepressible childhood curiosity. He didn't acknowledge her at first, typing something on his laptop, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the awareness of her presence. What are you working on? She asked. Business. What kind? The kind that's not for children. She processed this, then noticed a framed photograph on his desk, the only personal item in the entire sterile space. It showed a younger Nikolai, smiling, actually smiling, with a little girl on his shoulders. The girl had dark curls and was laughing, her small hands gripping his hair. Who's that? Lily asked. Nikolai's fingers stilled on the keyboard. For a long moment, he didn't answer. My daughter, he finally said. Katerina. Where is she now? She died. A long time ago. Lily's face crumpled with immediate empathy. That's so sad. What happened? Lily. Martha Williams called sharply. Don't ask him that. Come back here. But Nikolai surprised them both. She was 6. Wrong place, wrong time. Men who wanted to hurt me hurt her instead. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hand had moved to his chest, pressing against the hidden locket. I couldn't save her. Lily was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she said, with the devastating simplicity of childhood logic, Is that why you don't want to save us? Because you're scared you can't. The question hung in the air like smoke. Nikolai looked at this impossible child, this 5-year-old who'd somehow seen straight through his armor to the festering wound beneath. Yes, he admitted. The word tasted like ash. Lily nodded seriously, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. Then she did something that made his breath catch. She climbed onto the chair next to his desk, uninvited, unafraid, and pulled her worn backpack into her lap. Do you want to see my important things? She asked quietly. Mama says when people are sad about people who died, sometimes it helps to see that there are still people alive who need them. Martha Williams started to object, but something in the moment stopped her. She watched, holding her breath, as her daughter unzipped the backpack with careful, reverent movements. Nikolai found himself nodding, unable to speak. Lily pulled out her treasures one by one, laying them on his desk like offerings. Her mother's ID badge, the photo showing Martha Williams younger, hopeful, smiling in front of what looked like her own restaurant back in China. This is from before we came here. Before things got hard. A teddy bear with one button eye missing, the fur matted and loved nearly bald. This is Hope. Baba gave him to me before he died. I tell him my secrets. 3 crackers wrapped carefully in a napkin. For emergencies. Mama says always save something for later. A photograph, creased and worn from handling. Martha Williams holding baby Lily in a hospital, both of them looking exhausted and perfect. This is when I was born. Mama says I was the best thing that ever happened. And finally, a small notebook with crayon drawings on the cover. Lily hesitated before pulling this one out, her small hands trembling slightly. Mama made me promise if anything happened to her, I'd show someone these. Someone who could help. She pushed the notebook toward him. She drew what the manager does. So someone would believe us. Nikolai opened the notebook with hands that weren't quite steady. The drawings were crude, stick figures and simple shapes, but their meaning was devastatingly clear. Page after page of a woman and a man. The man hitting. The man taking money. The man locking the woman in a room. Words in shaky handwriting. Basement, can't tell. He said he'll hurt Lily. The final page made his vision blur. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Please protect my daughter. She deserves better than this. She deserves everything. Martha Williams. Nikolai's jaw clenched so tightly it ached. His hands gripped the edges of the notebook, knuckles white. That's why I picked you, Lily said softly. Mama's drawing said find someone strong. Someone scary. Someone the bad men are afraid of. She looked up at him with those impossibly trusting eyes. Are you going to help us? For real this time? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from his contact in the police department. Morrison is pushing hard on the kidnapping angle. Says he has witnesses placing you with the child. Sicarios are backing the manager's story. You have maybe 12 hours before this becomes official. Another text, from Dmitri. Sicario leadership wants a meeting. Tonight. They're calling it negotiations, but we both know what it is. They want the woman and kid as a gesture of respect. Nikolai stared at the messages, then at the notebook still open on his desk, then at the small girl watching him with heartbreaking hope. Every instinct screamed to cut his losses. Give them up. Avoid the war. But then Lily did something that changed everything. She reached across the desk and placed her small hand over his. My Baba used to say the bravest thing isn't being unafraid, she said quietly, her voice carrying the echo of her father's wisdom. It's being scared but doing it anyway. Nikolai looked at her hand on his. So tiny, so fragile, so utterly trusting. He thought of Katerina. Of the moment he'd realized he was too late to save her. Of the 16 years he'd spent building walls so he'd never feel that helpless again. And he realized something. The walls hadn't made him strong. They'd made him a coward. Your mother needs medical attention, he said finally. The doctor will be here soon. After he's treated her, we need to talk about what happens next. Are you sending us away? Lily asked, her voice very small. Nikolai closed the notebook carefully and handed it back to her. Then he looked her straight in the eyes. This brave, impossible child who'd asked a monster to be human. No, he said. I'm figuring out how to keep you. For the first time since entering his office, Lily smiled. It was small, tentative, but real. Thank you, Mr. Nikolai. From the couch, Martha Williams was crying silently, one hand pressed over her mouth. Whether from relief or fear or pain, Nikolai couldn't tell. Maybe all three. His phone rang again. Business that couldn't wait, problems that needed solving, an empire that demanded constant attention. But for the first time in 15 years, Nikolai Volkov let it ring to voicemail. Because sitting across from him was something more important than business. Something he'd thought he'd lost forever. A reason to be brave. The doctor came and went like a ghost. An older man with steady hands and no questions. The kind who'd learned long ago that working for Nikolai Volkov meant treating injuries without ever asking how they happened. Martha Williams's ribs were wrapped, her cuts cleaned and bandaged, pain medication administered. Rest, the doctor had said. No strenuous activity for at least 2 weeks. The concussion is mild, but watch for dizziness, nausea, vision changes. Now she lay on Nikolai's massive couch, Lily curled beside her, both of them finally still. The medication had dulled Martha Williams's pain enough that exhaustion could take over. Within minutes, she was asleep, one arm draped protectively over her daughter. But Lily remained awake, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. Nikolai worked at his desk, hyper-aware of the small body on his couch, the steady breathing of the injured woman, the domestic scene that felt alien in this space designed for violence and power. His phone lit up constantly. Texts, calls, demands. The Sicarios wanted their meeting moved up. Morrison was issuing a warrant. His own lieutenants were questioning his judgment. The Empire was starting to crack at the edges, all because he'd chosen to protect 2 people who meant nothing to his bottom line. He should have been focused on damage control. Instead, He kept glancing at the couch, checking that they were still breathing, still safe. "Mr. Nikolai?" Lily's small voice cut through the silence. She'd sat up, careful not to wake her mother, and was watching him with those two knowing eyes. "You should sleep," he said. "I can't. My brain is too loud." She climbed off the couch, padding across the room in her sock feet, her shoes neatly lined up beside the door the way her mother had taught her. "Does your brain get loud too?" "Yes." "What do you think about when it gets loud?" Nikolai set down his phone, looked at this child who asked the kinds of questions most adults spent their lives avoiding. "Things I can't change," he said finally. "Mistakes I can't fix." Lily nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. She climbed into the chair beside his desk again. It was becoming her spot. He realized with something like alarm. "Do you think about your daughter?" "Every day." "What was she like?" No one had asked him that in 16 years. People offered condolences, then changed the subject. Even his closest associates knew not to mention Katerina. But this child sat there, genuinely curious, genuinely caring, waiting for an answer. "She was brave," Nikolai heard himself say. "Braver than me." She wasn't afraid of anything. Spiders, heights, the dark. She used to climb trees and laugh when I told her to be careful. His voice roughened. She had her mother's smile. Her mother died when she was 3, and I thought I couldn't survive it. But Katerina, she kept me alive. She'd wake me up every morning saying, "Papa, it's an adventure day." Even when things were bad, she found reasons to smile. "She sounds like she was the best," Lily said softly. "She was. I bet she'd be proud of you. For helping us." Nikolai's throat tightened. "I don't think." "My Baba died 2 years ago," Lily interrupted quietly. "A big piece of building fell on him at his work. Mama cried for a whole month. But before he died, he told me something." She reached for Hope, her one-eyed teddy bear, clutching him for comfort. "He said even when people go away, they don't stop loving us. He said they watch from somewhere else and they hope we choose to be brave and kind." "You remember that? You were only 3. Mama reminds me. When things get scary." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you think the dead people can see us?" "I don't know. I think they can. I think your Katerina sees you right now, and she's happy you're not letting the bad men win." Something in Nikolai's chest cracked open, a fissure in the concrete he'd poured over his heart 16 years ago. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the locket he'd kept hidden all these years. With shaking fingers, he opened it. Inside was a small photograph. Katerina at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made. "This was the last picture I took of her," he said, his voice barely audible. "The day before she died. She'd drawn a picture of our family. Me, her, and her mother as an angel. She said angels never really leave, they just get invisible." Lily leaned forward, studying the photograph with intense concentration. "She looks nice. Like she gave good hugs. The best hugs. I bet she'd like that you're keeping us safe. I bet she's cheering for you." Nikolai's hand trembled. He closed the locket carefully, but this time he didn't hide it back under his shirt. He let it rest visible against his chest. "Can I tell you a secret?" Lily asked. "Yes. I'm really scared. I've been scared for a long time. Mama tries to hide it, but I know things are bad. I hear her crying at night when she thinks I'm sleeping. I see the bruises. I know the manager is mean and dangerous and Mama can't make him stop." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm just a kid. I can't protect her. I can't fight. I can't make money. I can't do anything except hide and be quiet and try not to make things worse. Lily. But tonight, when I saw him dragging Mama away, I knew if I didn't do something, something really bad would happen. So I picked you. And I was so scared you'd say no or laugh at me or be mean. But you weren't. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You're the first grown-up who listened. Nikolai felt something he hadn't felt in 16 years. Purpose. Not the cold, calculated purpose of building an empire. Not the vengeful purpose of making himself untouchable. But the warm, terrifying purpose of protecting something precious. Do you know why I really came to America? He asked suddenly. Lily shook her head. Because in Russia, I couldn't protect my daughter. The people who wanted to hurt me used her to hurt me. I thought if I came here, started over, got powerful enough that no one could touch me. He stopped, the futility of it crushing him. But power didn't save her. I was too focused on building walls, on making myself untouchable. I forgot that walls keep everything out, including the people you love. Is that why you're scared to help us? Because you think we'll die too. The bluntness of childhood. Unbearable and necessary. Yes, he admitted. Lily was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said something that destroyed him. But Mr. Nikolai, if you don't help us, we might die anyway. At least if you try, we have a chance. She was right. This 5-year-old child saw clearly what he'd been unable to face. The men who are after you, he said slowly, they're dangerous. More dangerous than the manager. If I protect you, they'll come for me. For all of us. There will be violence. People will get hurt. Will you get hurt? Possibly. Are you scared? Terrified? Lily smiled then. A real smile, brave and bright. My Baba said being scared means you have something worth protecting. Before Nikolai could respond, Martha Williams stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up carefully, wincing, and her gaze immediately found her daughter. Lily, come here. Let Mr. Volkov work. It's fine, Nikolai said. But Martha Williams was already standing, swaying slightly, reaching for her daughter with one hand while the other pressed against her wrapped ribs. We've imposed enough. Thank you for the doctor, for everything. But we should. Sit down, Nikolai commanded. Sir, we can't stay here. You've been kind, but we're putting you in danger and I can't. Sit down. The authority in his voice left no room for argument. Martha Williams sat. Nikolai stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city that had been his kingdom for 15 years. Then he turned back to face them, this injured woman and her impossibly brave daughter. I need to show you something, he said. He pulled out his laptop, turned it around, and played the security footage Dmitri had compiled. 1 month of surveillance from the Crimson Rose's cameras. Martha Williams's hands flew to her mouth as she watched herself on screen, being cornered by the manager in the storage room, flinching away from his grabbing hands, forced down the basement stairs, emerging hours later with fresh bruises and tears she wiped away before returning to work. Again and again and again. Why are you showing me this? She whispered. Because you need to understand what you're up against. The manager, Frank Russo, he's not just some small-time criminal. He's protected by the Sicario organization. They run protection rackets for half the restaurants in this district. If I go after him, I go after them. Then don't, Martha Williams said immediately. Please, we'll disappear. We'll leave the city. You've done enough. I'm not finished. Nikolai pulled up another file. I had my people dig into Russo's operation. He's been doing this for years. Targeting immigrant women, especially undocumented ones. Women who can't report him, who have no protection, who'll do anything to keep their children safe. He looked directly at Martha Williams. You're not the first. You're just the first one whose daughter was brave enough to ask for help. Martha Williams's face crumbled. I tried to protect her. I tried so hard. You did protect her. You taught her to be brave. To trust her instincts. To find someone strong. Nikolai's voice softened. You taught her to survive. That's why she's alive. That's why she found me. But now what? You said yourself these Sicario people are dangerous. If they want us, if they're demanding. I'm meeting with them tomorrow. 6 p.m. The room went silent. What will you tell them? Martha Williams asked, her voice barely audible. Nikolai looked at Lily, who was clutching Hope so tightly her knuckles were white. At Martha Williams, who'd sacrificed everything trying to give her daughter a better life. At these two people who'd somehow, impossibly, reminded him what it felt like to choose humanity over survival. I'm going to tell them no. Martha Williams gasped. That will start a war. Yes. You could die. Yes. Why? Her voice broke. Why would you risk everything for us? You don't even know us. We're nothing to you, You're not nothing. The words came out fierce, certain. 16 years ago, I lost my daughter because I was too late. I've spent every day since then building power so I'd never be helpless again. But power made me hollow. It made me into someone who could watch a child beg for help and calculate the cost of saying yes. He looked at Lily. Until you reminded me what I'd forgotten. What's that? Lily asked. That some things are worth the cost. Lily stood up from her chair, walked around the desk, and wrapped her small arms around him. No hesitation. No fear. Just pure instinctive trust. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for being brave. And Nikolai Volkov, ruthless crime lord, feared enforcer, the man who'd built an empire on calculated violence, wrapped his arms carefully around a 5-year-old girl and let himself feel something he'd buried 16 years ago. Hope. Morning came soft through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the office in shades of gold and amber. Nikolai hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his chair, watching over Martha Williams and Lily like a sentinel, his mind cycling through strategies and contingencies for the meeting that would determine whether he lived or died defending two people he'd known for less than 24 hours. It was insane. Reckless. Everything he'd trained himself not to be. And yet, watching Lily sleep curled against her mother, Hope clutched to her chest, he couldn't bring himself to regret the decision. Martha Williams woke first, stiffening when she realized where she was, then relaxing as memory returned. She carefully extracted herself from Lily's embrace and limped to where Nikolai sat. You didn't sleep, she observed quietly. I don't sleep much. Nightmares. He glanced at her, surprised by her perceptiveness. Something like that. She settled gingerly into the chair beside his desk, Lily's chair. He thought with something uncomfortably close to fondness. May I ask you something? Yes. Why do you really do this? And please don't say it's about your daughter or honor, or any of the things men say when they don't want to admit the truth. Her dark eyes were knowing, gentle. I've spent 2 years reading Men to Survive. I know when someone is protecting themselves with a story. Nikolai was quiet for a long moment. Then, because I'm tired. Of what? Of being afraid. Of building walls. Of waking up every morning and wondering what the point is of being powerful if you have nothing worth protecting. He met her eyes. Your daughter looked at me and saw someone who could save her. She was wrong. I'm not that person. I'm a criminal. A killer. I've done things that would make you take Lily and run if you knew. I know who you are, Martha Williams said softly. Everyone knows who Nikolai Volkov is. The Siberian wolf. The man who doesn't negotiate, doesn't forgive, doesn't feel. She paused. But that's not who held my daughter last night. That's not who let her climb into his chair and talk about dead fathers and brave little girls. That was weakness. No. Her voice was firm. That was humanity. There's a difference. Before Nikolai could respond, Lily stirred on the couch, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. When she saw them talking, her face lit up. "You're still here," she said to Nikolai, as if she'd half expected him to vanish in the night. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Grown-ups leave sometimes." The casual devastation of that statement hung in the air. "I'm not leaving," Nikolai said and realized he meant it. Lily patted over, and Martha Williams immediately tried to smooth her daughter's sleep-mussed hair, but Lily squirmed away. "Mama, stop. I'm hungry." "We'll find something," Martha Williams started. "I'll order breakfast," Nikolai interrupted, already reaching for his phone. 20 minutes later, room service arrived from the restaurant below. Not the usual gourmet fare served to his business associates, but simple, comforting food. Scrambled eggs, toast with jam, fresh fruit, orange juice, and inexplicably chocolate chip pancakes. Lily's eyes went wide. "Pancakes? Real pancakes? You don't like pancakes?" Nikolai asked. "I love pancakes. We used to have them every Sunday before." She stopped, the memory dimming her brightness. "Before things got hard." "Then we'll have them today," Nikolai said. "New tradition." The words escaped before he could stop them, implying a future he had no business promising. But Lily's answering smile made it impossible to take back. They ate together at the small conference table Nikolai rarely used, an absurd domestic scene in an office designed for intimidation. Martha Williams kept glancing at him like she couldn't quite reconcile the man who'd threatened her manager with the man who was carefully cutting Lily's pancakes into small pieces. "You're good at that," she observed. "I had practice. Once." Understanding flickered in her eyes, but she didn't push. Lily ate with enthusiasm, maple syrup on her chin, chattering between bites about everything and nothing. Her favorite color, yellow, her favorite animal, pandas, what she wanted to be when she grew up, a chef like Mama used to be. "You were a chef?" Nikolai asked Martha Williams. Pride and grief warred on her face. "I owned a restaurant in Marthagdu. Small, but it was mine. We specialized in traditional Sichuan cuisine." She smiled sadly. "I was going to expand, open a second location. That's why we came here. My husband had a cousin who said there were opportunities, that we could build something better for Lily." "What happened?" "The cousin disappeared with our savings. Immigration lawyers took what was left. My husband's work visa was temporary, and after he died." She shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes. "I couldn't go back. We had nothing left in China. So I cleaned houses, washed dishes, waited tables. Whatever would keep Lily fed and safe." "But you weren't safe." "No." Her voice hardened. "Men like Russo, they can smell desperation. He offered me the job at the Crimson Rose, said he'd help with my visa situation. I was grateful. Stupid." She touched her bruised ribs unconsciously. "By the time I realized what the job actually cost, I was trapped." Nikolai's jaw clenched. "After today, Russo won't be a problem. After today, you might not be alive." "Mama," Lily protested. "Don't say that." "Sweetheart, Mr. Nikolai is putting himself in danger for us. The men he's meeting tonight there—" "I know they're dangerous," Lily interrupted. "But he promised he'd try." And he keeps his promises. She looked at Nikolai with absolute certainty. Right. Right, Nikolai heard himself say. After breakfast, something unexpected happened. Lily discovered the chess set on Nikolai's shelf, the expensive one he'd bought years ago and never used, a remnant of the life he'd had before Katerina died, when he dreamed of teaching his daughter the game her grandfather had taught him. "Can we play?" Lily asked. "You know how. You started teaching me yesterday. Remember? The horse piece." He'd forgotten. In the chaos of everything, he'd forgotten those few minutes of normalcy. They set up the board on the coffee table. Martha Williams watched from the couch, her expression unreadable, as Nikolai patiently explained the rules, showed Lily how each piece moved, let her make mistakes without judgment. "The queen is the most powerful," he explained. "She can move in any direction, as far as she wants." "Like Mama," Lily said simply. "Mama can do anything." Martha Williams's eyes filled with tears. They played slowly, Lily concentrating fiercely on each move, Nikolai letting her win but not so obviously that she'd know. When she finally checkmated his king, she squealed with delight. "I won. I beat you." "You did." And despite everything, the danger, the impossible odds, the meeting tonight that could end with his death, Nikolai smiled. Actually smiled. Lily noticed. "You should smile more. It makes you look less scary." "Maybe I want to be scary." "Not to us, though." "Right. No. Not to you." She launched herself at him, hugging him with the unself-conscious affection only children possess. Over her head, Nikolai met Martha Williams's eyes. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. He nodded. The afternoon passed in surreal domesticity. Lily drew pictures with the expensive pens from Nikolai's desk, narrating each drawing. "This is you, and this is me, and this is Mama, and we're all safe and the bad men are gone and we're eating pancakes forever." "Forever is a long time," Nikolai observed. "That's how long I want to stay safe." Martha Williams taught him a card game from her childhood, their hands accidentally brushing as they reached for the same card, both of them pulling back with a spark of awareness that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with possibility. Nikolai found himself noticing things he hadn't let himself notice in years. The way Martha Williams tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the quiet strength in how she moved despite her injuries, the way her eyes softened when she looked at her daughter. And Martha Williams noticed him. Not the Siberian wolf, not the crime lord, but the man who'd carefully saved a juice box for no reason, who'd stayed awake all night keeping watch, who looked at Lily like she was precious. "What time is the meeting?" Martha Williams asked quietly when Lily was distracted with her drawings. 6 o'clock. "Will you come back?" The question was simple. The answer was anything but. "I don't know." "If you don't," her voice caught. "If you don't, I want you to know that you gave us something we haven't had in 2 years." "What's that?" "Hope." She glanced at Lily. "Real hope. Not the kind you force yourself to believe in because the alternative is giving up, but the kind that feels possible. You did that. In one day, you made my daughter laugh again. You made me believe we might actually survive this." Martha Williams. "Let me finish." She looked directly at him. "If something happens tonight, if you don't come back, I'll make sure Lily knows. I'll tell her about the man who was brave enough to choose us when no one else would. I'll tell her about Katerina, and how you honored your daughter's memory by protecting us. I'll make sure she remembers that heroes aren't the people who aren't afraid. They're the people who are terrified but do the right thing anyway." Nikolai's throat tightened. "I'm not a hero." "No," Martha Williams agreed. "You're something better. You're human." At 5 o'clock, Nikolai stood, straightening his jacket. Time to face the sicarios. Time to either save these 2 people or die trying. Lily looked up from her drawings, understanding dawning. You're leaving now? Yes. Are you coming back? He knelt down to her level, something he would have never done yesterday. I'm going to try my best. She threw her arms around his neck. Be brave like your Katerina would want. Be brave like my Baba. I will. Promise. He thought about his rule against promises. About how promises were chains, vulnerabilities, ways for the world to hurt you. Then he looked at her face, this child who'd asked the impossible and somehow made it seem necessary, and broke his own rule. I promise. When he reached the door, Martha Williams called out, Nikolai. He turned. She was standing now, Lily beside her, both of them looking at him with expressions that made his chest ache. Come back, Martha Williams said simply. Please. Come back. And for the first time in 16 years, Nikolai Volkov had a reason to. The meeting place was neutral territory. An abandoned warehouse on the docks where the city's underworld conducted business that couldn't happen in civilized spaces. Nikolai arrived with Dmitri and 4 of his best men. The Sicarios had twice that number, their leader, a man called Santos, sitting at a makeshift table like a king holding court. Volkov, Santos greeted, his smile not reaching his eyes. I'm glad you came. Shows respect. Let's skip the pleasantries, Nikolai said. You want the woman and child. I'm here to tell you no. The temperature in the room dropped. Santos leaned back, his expression hardening. See, that's where we have a problem. Frank Russo is under our protection. You disrespected him. You disrespected us. In our world, that has consequences. Russo was trafficking women, abusing them. I don't care whose protection he has, that ends now. Trafficking. Santos laughed. He was running a business arrangement. These women owed debts. He was collecting. That's capitalism, my friend. Beating a woman unconscious isn't capitalism. It's brutality. Semantics. Santos stood, his men tensing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over Martha Williams and her daughter. They'll face consequences for the trouble they've caused. Russo gets his restitution. We maintain order. Everyone walks away. And if I refuse? Santos's smile turned predatory. Then we have a war. And wars are expensive. Volkov. You've built a nice empire. Imports, money laundering, protection networks. Be ashamed to watch it burn because you got sentimental over a waitress and her brat. Nikolai's hand clenched. Choose your next words carefully. Or what? You'll what? Santos stepped closer. You think you can take us? We own this district. We own the cops you don't. We own judges, city officials. You're powerful, but you're not invincible. He paused. Besides, I know your weakness now. You care. That makes you vulnerable. It makes me dangerous. It makes you stupid. Santos pulled out his phone, turned it toward Nikolai. On the screen was surveillance footage, the Crimson Rose, earlier that day. Lily drawing pictures. Martha Williams sleeping on his couch. Intimate, domestic, damning. We've been watching. Sweet little setup you got. Playing house with the refugee and her kid. Santos's voice dripped contempt. How long before you slip? Before they become leverage? You saved them once. You think you can protect them forever. Nikolai's blood turned to ice. Here's my final offer, Santos continued. Give them to us now. Walk away. Keep your empire. Or keep them and watch everything you've built collapse. Your choice. Wolf. Business or sentiment. Every strategic instinct screamed the answer. Cut losses. Survive. Rebuild. But then he thought of Lily's voice. You're just like all the other grown-ups. You're a liar. I need time to think, Nikolai said finally. Santos smiled victoriously. You have until midnight. After that we come for them. And we won't be gentle. Back at the Crimson Rose, Nikolai found Dmitri waiting with worse news. Morrison issued the warrant. Kidnapping charges. He's coming for you tomorrow morning. Dimitri's face was grim. Boss, the walls are closing in. The Sicarios, the cops, even some of our own people are questioning this. They don't understand why you're risking everything for. I know what they think. Then you know the smart play. Give them up. Say you were protecting them temporarily, that you're returning them to proper authorities. Spin it as civic duty. And then what happens to them? Boss. What happens, Dmitri? Dmitri looked away. Russo makes them disappear. The Sicarios make an example. The kid goes into a system that won't protect her. The mother. He didn't finish. Nikolai walked to the window of his office, staring at the city lights. Behind him, on the couch, Martha Williams and Lily were sleeping again, exhausted by fear and uncertainty. He'd told them he was meeting suppliers. Had lied to protect them from knowing how bad things had gotten. Now he watched them. Martha Williams's arm around her daughter, Lily clutching hope even in sleep, and felt the Williams of 16 years of armor cracking completely. His phone buzzed. A message from Santos. Tick-tock. Wolf. Midnight is coming. Nikolai closed his eyes. He'd built an empire by always choosing survival. By never letting sentiment cloud strategy. By understanding that in his world, caring was a weakness that got people killed. Katerina had died because he'd cared. Because enemies knew they could hurt him by hurting her. And now here he was, about to make the same mistake. Except it wasn't a mistake. Not this time. He looked at the photograph of Katerina in his locket, then at Lily sleeping on his couch. What would you want me to do? He asked his daughter silently. And somehow he knew the answer. At 11 p.m., Martha Williams woke to find Nikolai standing by the window, his phone in pieces on his desk, his expression carved from stone. What happened? She asked quietly, careful not to wake Lily. They gave me until midnight. To do what? He turned to face her. To choose. You and Lily, or everything I've built. Martha Williams's hand flew to her mouth. No. No, you can't. We'll leave. Right now. We'll disappear. You don't have to. Where will you go? They have your picture. Russo knows your face. The Sicarios have connections everywhere. Then what do we do? Nikolai was quiet for a long moment. Then, I need to tell you something. About the night my daughter died. Martha Williams sat, listening. I was in a meeting. Important meeting, the kind that determined territory, profits, survival. Katerina was home with security, professionals, people I trusted. But my enemies, they'd been planning. They knew my schedule, knew when I'd be occupied. His voice cracked. They got past security. They took her. By the time I got the call, she was already dead. They'd killed her to send me a message. Nikolai. I could have been there. I could have chosen to stay home that night. Could have said the meeting wasn't as important as being with my daughter. But I chose business. I chose empire. And she paid the price. Tears streamed down Martha Williams's face. It wasn't your fault. It was. I chose wrong. And I swore I'd never make that mistake again. I swore I'd never care about anything more than survival, never let anyone matter enough to hurt me. He looked at her, then at Lily. And then your daughter walked into my bar and asked me to be brave. So what are you going to do? I'm going to choose right this time. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Martha Williams stood, walked to him, placed her hand gently on his scarred cheek. Why? Why throw away 16 years of building this life for two people you barely know? Because you're not the empire. You're not the money or the power or the reputation. His voice was raw. You're the reason any of it matters. You're what I've been protecting myself from feeling since Katerina died. He caught her hand. You're what makes me human. Martha Williams's breath caught. Nikolai. Lily stirred on the couch, sitting up, rubbing her eyes. She saw them standing close, saw her mother's tears, saw Nikolai's expression, and understood with child's intuition that something terrible was happening. You're giving us away, aren't you? She said quietly. You're going to let the bad men take us. No. Then what? Nikolai crossed to her, knelt down. I'm going to fight. Really fight. Which means things are going to get dangerous. Very dangerous. And I need you to be brave one more time. How brave? The bravest. I need you and your mama to go with Dmitri. He's going to take you somewhere safe, somewhere the bad men can't find you. And you need to stay there, no matter what you hear, until I come get you. What if you don't come? The question destroyed him. Then Dmitri will make sure you're safe. He'll get you new identities, new lives, far away from here. But what about you? I'm going to make sure the bad men never hurt you again. Lily threw her arms around him, sobbing. I don't want you to die. I don't want you to be like my Baba and go away forever. Nikolai held her, his own eyes burning. I'm going to try very hard not to. But if I do, I need you to remember something. What? That you saved me first. You made me remember how to be human. Whatever happens tonight, you did that. You and your mama. He looked at Martha Williams. You both did that. Dmitri took them to a safe house across the city. Then he returned to Nikolai, who was arming himself in his office, preparing for war. The men are ready, Dmitri said. But boss, we're outnumbered 3-1. I know. This might be suicide. I know. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway. Dmitri smiled grimly. Good. I was worried you'd gone soft. But this? This is the wolf I remember. The one who fought his way out of Siberia. The one who doesn't bow to anyone. At 11:55 p.m., Nikolai's phone rang. Santos. Well? What's your answer? Come and take them, Nikolai said coldly. If you can. The line went dead. At 12:01 a.m., the Sicarios came for the Crimson Rose. What happened next became legend in the city's underworld. The night the wolf bared his teeth. Nikolai had spent 16 years building his empire quietly, diplomatically, avoiding open warfare. But that night, he reminded everyone why they'd feared him in the first place. The fight was brutal. Bloody. The Crimson Rose became a battlefield. But Nikolai had done something Santos hadn't expected. He'd called in every favor, every alliance, every connection he'd built over 16 years. The Russians came. The Irish came. Even rival crews who respected the old codes, who believed some lines shouldn't be crossed. By dawn, it was over. Santos was dead. Russo had fled the city. The Sicarios' power was broken. But Nikolai had paid the price. 3 bullets, one in his shoulder, one in his side, one grazing his head. He was alive, barely, when Dmitri dragged him to the car. 3 weeks later. Lily sat in the hospital room chair, swinging her legs, reading a picture book aloud to the man in the bed. Nikolai listened, his body healing slowly, his soul healing faster. Martha Williams entered with coffee, saw her daughter's head resting against Nikolai's uninjured arm, and smiled. "She's been reading to you for an hour," Martha Williams said. "I think she's afraid if she stops, you'll disappear." "I'm not going anywhere," Nikolai said and meant it. The war had cost him. Parts of his empire had fractured. Enemies had emerged. But he'd also gained something he'd thought lost forever. Purpose beyond survival. "The apartment is ready," Martha Williams said quietly. "The one you mentioned. If the offer still stands." "It stands. And the restaurant space downstairs. I meant what I said. It's yours if you want it." Her eyes filled with tears. "Nikolai, I can't possibly repay. You already did. Both of you." Lily looked up from her book. "Does this mean we get to stay?" "Forever. If you want to. I want to." She bounced excitedly. "Can I have my own room? And can you teach me more chess? And Mama can cook again and you can eat her food and we can be—" She paused, searching for the word. "A family?" Nikolai offered quietly. "Yes. Can we be a family?" Nikolai looked at Martha Williams, saw the hope and fear and possibility in her eyes, and realized he was looking at his second chance. "Yes," he said. "We can be a family." Lily cheered, then immediately shushed herself when a nurse glared through the door. She climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of his injuries, and whispered conspiratorially, "I told Mama you'd come back. I told her you keep your promises." "I try." That's all Baba ever said too. He said trying is what makes you brave. Martha Williams sat on the other side of the bed, taking Nikolai's hand carefully. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing us. Thank you for giving me something worth choosing." 6 months later. Martha's Kit Martha opened on a Thursday. A small, elegant restaurant on the ground floor of Nikolai's building. The reviews were spectacular. Martha Williams's traditional Sichuan cuisine drew crowds from across the city. Upstairs, Lily did homework at the Kit Martha table of their new apartment. A real home with real furniture and windows that let in light. Hope sat beside her, now with 2 button eyes thanks to Nikolai's surprisingly skilled sewing. And in the doorway, Nikolai watched them. His found family, his second chance, his proof that it was never too late to choose differently. Martha Williams joined him, sliding her hand into his. Over 6 months, their careful friendship had deepened into something more. Tentative, patient, real. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I spent 16 years building walls to keep pain out. And a 5-year-old girl walked right through them in a yellow dress." Martha Williams smiled. "She has that effect." Lily looked up from her homework. "Nikolai, come check my math." He crossed the room, settled beside her, corrected her arithmetic gently. She beamed at him with the unself-conscious love only children possess, and he felt his chest tighten with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "Mama says you're going to marry us someday," Lily announced. "Lily!" Martha Williams gasped. "What? You did say that? You said—" "That's enough," Martha Williams said, mortified. But Nikolai was laughing. Actually laughing, the sound rusty but real. He looked at Martha Williams, whose face was bright red, and said, "Did you?" It was hypothetical. I didn't mean." "Because I would," he said quietly. "If you wanted. Someday." The apartment went silent. Martha Williams's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" Lily squealed and launched herself at him, hugging him tight. "Does this mean you're going to be my new Baba?" Nikolai held her, this brave girl who'd saved him by asking him to save her, and felt 16 years of grief finally begin to ease. "If you'll have me." Yes. She pulled back, suddenly serious. But you have to promise something. What? Promise you'll never leave. Promise you'll always come back. Promise you'll be brave even when you're scared. He thought of Katerina, of the promises he couldn't keep. But he also thought of Martha Williams's hand in his, of Lily's trust, of the life they were building together from the ruins of everything he'd lost. I promise, he said. I promise I'll try every day to be the man you both deserve. That's all we need, Martha Williams said, joining their embrace. Just trying is enough. Outside, the city continued its dangerous dance. But inside this small apartment above a restaurant that smelled of ginger and garlic and hope, 3 broken people had found each other and become whole. Nikolai opened his locket. Inside now were 2 photos. Katerina on one side, smiling. Lily on the other, laughing. Thank you, he told his daughter silently. Thank you for sending her to me. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead watch from, Katerina smiled. Her papa had finally learned to be brave again. What does family mean to you? Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we're born to. They're the ones we choose and who choose us back. Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Share your story in the comments. And if this story moved you, let us know. Your words matter. Thank you for being here.